to talk to you today about paranoid personality disorder. So certainly we've seen people maybe in our workplace, our home, our friends who have characteristics of constantly trying to understand and look toward others in a suspicious way. And that is something that can plague them for life and impact various aspects of their life. The characteristics are typically that of suspiciousness, a cynical person, and also critical analysis of every transaction that happens to the point where it drives the other party who's involved in it as frustrated, anxious, and perplexed as to why this person is accusing them of so many things. But as we realize, the situations arise as to what is underlying the causal root of it, why people get so paranoid, why they get so suspicious of others. And those fall into what they call personality disorders that are like cluster A. And as I said in an earlier video on general personality disorders, you have to distinguish it between a trait and a disorder, because very often the trait is something that just occurs occasionally. They might say it under certain circumstances, but not necessarily carry it in every aspect of their life. When it becomes a full-blown personality disorder is when that suspiciousness is carried into all parts of their lives to the point where it interferes with their functioning. Like it may interfere with the job functions, it may interfere with social life, and certainly interfere with your love life if you're constantly suspicious and jealous of your loved one. Okay, now that needs to be distinguished from actual jealousy, which is a whole other topic in itself. But suspiciousness is when, in fact, when you're paranoid, there's no basis for the interpretation. Other people don't see it that way, and it's a bit out of your character or out of your character expected in your cultural norms, whatever that may be. It's a means of trying to keep your life intact, keeping tabs on people. It stems from different fears, different disappointments, perhaps a life trauma that set them on a way where they don't truly expect others to treat them well. Perhaps they've had bad experiences. So those are things that need to be looked at. And in diagnosing, you always want to be careful, because we don't want laypersons just throwing these terms around and use them as bonkers to hurt other people. So as my favorite word is zingers. So we don't want them used as zingers to hurt other people. Symptoms do occur, and they are pervasive, and they are enduring. That means they last over time. Typical personality disorders do not appear until late adolescence or early adulthood. So that's kind of a distinction there, just for at least the paranoid one. Because, of course, if people are naturally hurt by others, you expect that to be a natural reaction, that they will be suspicious in the future. But it needs to be tapered with a realistic perspective of the total picture of what was that person's experiences and what do you think might have triggered such behaviors in their lifetime. Can it be biological? Yes, they do say it can be inherited. If you see your family members treating everything as suspicious, you may become that way yourself, or sometimes you can go the complete opposite and be too trusting. Okay, so traits are studied, but traits are a little milder. They don't really disturb all of your life. They usually are something people may notice or may not notice, and they may only occur under certain circumstances. But the actual full-blown personality disorder of paranoia does occur later in adulthood. And some of it comes from insecurity. So whatever the reason for that insecurity, belief system in others is definitely tainted with perceptions of misgivings or mistreatment. So that's very possible. Now, these traits can overlap across different disabilities, so you need to be careful not to try to pinpoint exactly. But any of these traits can fuel symptoms and build in a range of severity, so it becomes a little tougher, more frequent, more intense. And the focus of continual study, but the most part for personality disorders are enduring. They do last over time, and the experience differs from person to person. But in general, that overriding theme of suspiciousness is constant, and it does occur, and it's something that you need to look at when you're trying to figure out why somebody is saying something to you. How does it impact relationships? Well, It impacts the way you think, your cognition, the way you perceive events, what thoughts you have about events, good, bad, or indifferent. Also, the affect and the range of emotional responses are different. They may either be restricted or they may become explosive and overly heated in larger areas of deeper paranoia. Interpersonal functioning is impacted. It's usually the closest person that feels the blunt of it. And impulse control is another item associated with these personality disorders where that suspiciousness becomes so strong you just can't stop thinking that person is doing you wrong or mistreating you or disloyal to you. And those are all things that you really need to look at when you're trying to decipher these types of issues. Okay, so you would hope that it doesn't occur. You would hope the person could get some help, but very often the person who experiences the disorder doesn't believe it because their thought system is so fixed in that direction that it's difficult for them to see alternatives or solutions. So we want to rule out that it's not due to a physiological injury, a brain injury, epilepsy, or even the use of substances from the outside, because substances, of course, can alter our thinking, often does, often leads to not very pretty consequences when a person overindulges in drugs or substances. So with substances, you have the immediate high, but you also have the long-term effect of how that substance is affecting your brain and your neurological system. Now, people don't want to hear that because they rather deny and tell themselves the drugs are really good for them. They feel high, they feel great. But the truth is, long-term damage is being done to the individual who consistently uses drugs. So to assess if this personality disorder is ongoing and been there pre-existing drug use, maybe it takes a lot of interviewing, it takes a lot of collateral input from family members or loved ones who are concerned, and definitely persons who are allowed to speak to you with the permission of the client may help shed some light on the fact that this occurred early on in life, or did it just start recently? And so those are things that you need to all look up and weigh the consequences of all of them into making your diagnosis. But the layperson should never try to diagnose, because that's not what this is about. This particular talk is about how these personality disorders impact relationships. What happens to the family member who has the disorder and to the family members who experience the blunt of the disorder, as a paranoid person would actually act out in the realm of their episode. You can be paranoid for a constant amount of time, or you can be paranoid for a small amount of time during a psychotic episode. So you see, there's a lot of variations and a lot of variables that go into what these things happen. But the primary entity of paranoia is suspicion, distrust, and cynicalism towards others. Okay. The other thing you want to rule out is there a real reason that person experiences those tendencies? Has the person been cheated on? Has the person been mistreated by others? Has the person been dealt a bad blow with a family member, or circumstances where they were mistreated or cheated? Or if it's a couple's relationship, were they actually cheating on them? And so the suspicion is warranted, although it becomes denied by the party who's offending them. So these are all things you need to look at and be realistic. What is perhaps of concern is when people are paranoid and others know it, they're easier to manipulate because you can plant a seed. And some people, this is not good, but some people actually get a kick out of having a rise out of the other person. This could be a partner who likes attention, craves to pit one man against another or one woman against another, whatever the case may be, in a relationship. And so it satisfies them. So even though the person who has this disorder and can be paranoid, they can be manipulated and goaded into having an episode if a partner so desires. Maybe it's not done with maliciousness. Maybe others think it's funny when they see you overreact. So the kind of want to look out on both sides of the field, both the person who's doing the offending and the person who's procuring the offending. So everyone needs to work in cohesion to reassure this person that their paranoid suspicions are really not valid. Okay, that's not an easy task if they're convinced there's some cheating or mistreatment going on. So perhaps one reason that we have this transaction with a person within their own mind, so it's a mental dialogue that they have. If they perceive an event, two people can see the same event, but this paranoid person would see it in a paranoid manner. So let's just say you happen to be shopping in a store and you're in a retail store and the person is actually suspicious because somebody's looking at them, when in fact the person who looked at them was simply in their own daze and not paying attention, and that stare meant absolutely nothing to that other shopper, yet the person with the paranoid concepts believes they were staring at them and they're going to do something to them. They may have found a belief system that everybody's out to get them. For a party who wants to encourage their loved one to get some help and therapy, you might refer to it more as to get a reality check and encourage your partner to possibly, just go talk to somebody, and you can go with them and see if you explain the situation, if another person has that same interpretation that, yes, this is blown out of proportion from a paranoid persona. Because it's difficult to see how we react, so it's very hard for us to self-identify when we just offended somebody. And so that belief system could be so hardcore and ingrained in that person's personality or psyche that they don't know how to get around it. They cannot see the alternatives. It's a rather rigid way of thinking. So it's different from the person who approaches all people with suspicion versus one who has an occasional mistrust because somebody actually did mistreat them in the past, maybe cheated on them, maybe took their money, maybe disappointed them in some significant activity. And if those are real valid basis, then the person is not paranoid. That's a natural reaction to somebody who hurt you. So if you see some man lurking in an aisle in a grocery store and he really looks a little twisted, and this has happened, maybe flashes you with a raincoat or something, yes, definitely that person is somebody to be afraid of, and you're right to be suspicious that this person may not have your best interest at heart. You listen to your instincts, and that will kind of guide you along the way. If your instincts are so far off that they really think everybody's after you, then you have a problem. Okay, so it's kind of a circular thinking. It's like, oh my gosh, they're going to hurt me. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And so they look that way when they walk into a store, and everybody they look at, they believe is going to hurt them. So yes, those are instances of paranoid thinking. So you might become suspicious at school, at work, at home, socially, with coworkers. You may think they're out to get you, they're out to get your job. In some cases, they probably really are. Get a third party's interpretation of that same event, especially if they know all the characters involved. So you want to try to sort it out as judiciously and honestly as you can, because if you become too paranoid about things and you get that reputation, then everything you say is going to be discounted by others in the future. See what I mean? So now they say, well, I can't help him. He's always paranoid. He's always thinking somebody's going to hurt him. But in fact, there are some people that may experience that. What starts in a couple's relationship is very often while you're dating, the other person's attentive and you're both attentive and nobody says anything. But then within a few weeks or a month, the person becomes more possessive and definitely gets upset if a waiter just looks at you and asks you, what do you want off the menu? So that's when you become suspicious. You may interpret that and say, oh, look, he's so protective or so caring. He wants to make sure I get what I want. But maybe that's not the reason, but it's the reason they don't want you speaking to the waiter or waitress because you're jealous. So those are things to keep in mind. So very often the person who suspects others without sufficient basis, where the others are goofing on them and trying to get a rise out of them, so they make up a story or act in a suspicious manner for real reasons. That's pretty lousy to do. Okay, second is that persons who are preoccupied with unjustified doubts. Get it? Unjustified. It's really no basis for it. That you just want it to go ahead and blame that person for something, and other people, what is wrong, what's going on, they don't see it. Okay? If a party is also reluctant to confide in others, they may find that confiding in others is what they feel would be betrayed, because they are, again, suspicious of that person. They're afraid that their information would be used maliciously against them. There is no basis for their concern, but they feel that way. And so when you get 2 or 3 people noticing this suspicion, then you know you have concern. And the other person continuously cheers you, bears resentment towards the others, does slights to the others because they feel they mistreated them or they're going to do them wrong, and they become very defensive. And then also, personally, the person may perceive that slander attacks on a person in retribution for what they perceive is a paranoid statement or a suspicious friend or ally or associate. So they counterattack in a defensive mode, and that causes more trouble, as you can imagine, socially as well as in the workplace. And again, there's no basis for this reaction. That's the clue. Okay. And last but not least is recurrent suspicions about justification of why they're jealous, regardless of the fidelity of a spouse or a sexual partner. That's probably the strongest amount of paranoid thinking you can imagine, because this assumes that the sexual partner is not flirting, not really carrying on a relationship with another party. But unfortunately, there are times when your loved one may want that extra attention. They love to see you get riled up because it makes them feel more wanted or attentive or excited. And so they tantalize you or tease you with suspicious flirting with others in front of you simply to get that rise out of you. And that's pretty cruel, but it does happen. And we all know people we interact with also may have some other disorders or concerns. So then you kind of have a mix that's bound to erupt. So we're assuming there's no other forms of mental illness. There's no real outright schizophrenia. These are just social traits of being suspicious. So that is something that you have to weed out the truth in between. This is really hard to do when you're already biased in your own direction. So again, the best thing to do is get that third party opinion. You want to rule out that it's not due to a physiological problem like a brain injury or trauma. Head injuries are known to change personalities for at least temporarily, depending on how severe it is and where the injury took place on the brain. But all these things contribute to suspicious thinking, including neurological impairments such as with epilepsy and things like that. So we need to rule all that out first and find out the distinct personalities that person carries, and if it stays the same in all their realms, like home, social, and work. If everywhere this person goes, there's a following of chaos and accusations of mistrust or accusation of cheating or lying or stealing from them, then by all means, you can see the pattern now. It's consistent across all aspects of life, and it begins to interfere with functioning in the workplace. And interference, that persistence across all dynamics, all events, all types of interactions, and across all persons, regardless of their standing, whether it's a friend, family, friendship, coworker. Those are all typical of suspicious behavior that is persistent, enduring, and can represent a full-blown personality disorder. Now, the difference between traits, as I mentioned before, traits can happen. You might get suspicious once in a while, but it doesn't permeate and it doesn't endure and interact with every single aspect of your functioning. So typically you have a great home life, you may have a great work life, but you get suspicious socially. When you go out, you think people are looking at you at the bar, you think people are talking about you at the restaurant. And so those are all things that need to be sorted out, and it helps to have a third party. You are the individual who experiences this paranoid suspicion of others. It behooves you to get a therapist that can work with you to help you sort these things out. It's not easy to do because you're already suspicious, so now you're suspicious of the therapist. So it does take some researching and interviewing to see if you have some rapport with the therapist and see if that'll work for you. When you know you need to go is when your behavior, your suspicions are so bad that they hurt a loved one, they're disrupting your solidity of your marital relationship, your live-in partner, your significant other. So you need to have a third party for sure before you lose everything because of your suspicions or because of the paranoia. People can only live with so much disruption, and after a while, no matter how much they love you, it gets tiring. So be careful there. So in essence, your judgment and perception of events becomes so skewed toward untruth or your own perceptions, which are paranoid, that that's all you adhere to. You don't listen to any other logic or rational explanation for why things are happening. If you're not sure who to call, you can call APA referral system, because they also have a background on each person, and you can judge for yourself if you think you'd feel good with them, because otherwise you'll be on the counterattack the whole rest of your life. You'll be very defensive. Every relationship you come in contact with will happen, and you want to prevent that because it's ruining the quality of your own life. You're causing yourself own misery by not thinking straight. So if you're the party, take control of it and get yourself the help that you need. And if you are the person who receives this treatment from another party in your family, then by all means, you seek out assistance, professional assistance, and see how you can get help with that. But that is, paranoid personality disorder is strong. If it's full blown, almost every day there's an occurrence that comes up and there's an argument that ensues. Very few peaceful times are ahead if this personality of paranoia becomes so in depth and so enduring and consistent that every single day there's a problem in the home. So by all means, seek out help as fast as you can. Most likely it's going to be the loved one or the caretaker who's going to have to seek out the help, because the person who does experience paranoid thoughts is not about to open their mind too easily that there's something wrong with them, because they're already convinced there's something wrong with you, with the other party. So please get a therapist to look at it. They do become hypervigilant, so they're constantly looking for something to confirm their thoughts, constantly looking for some way to say, see, I'm right, you did it. And that's where the paranoia never stops. But you, as the loving caretaker or family member, get a reality check for yourself and see how you can bring your partner into it to get the help. I hope you do, because life is too short to waste in needless conflict, especially when it's all in your mind. If you enjoyed this video, please, by all means, sign in below and subscribe to my channel, and leave comments if you like. I promise I'll answer them. May all be well in your world. Bye.